Oh yeah, I've grown up around the salt water. It's been in my life my whole life. Even when I was a kid, I built a boat. Went up to the San Juans where we're sitting right now and did some diving with no wetsuit. People thought I was nuts. It's cold up here.
Mike and I have been boating since, I don't know, probably before we were married. We hung around a lake a lot with friends, lived on the lake while we were dating. When we first got married, Mike built a little wooden boat, and looking back on it, we shouldn't have, but we took our infant out for jaunts in the Sound while he fished, and we just gathered the sun. And it was just kind of a evolution as he earned more money. We bought bigger boats, so they went from a 12-foot to a 17-foot to a, what was our 21-foot bellboy with a little cuddy cabin and a little kind of sink and stove, to our first sailboat. And we got that because our kids were getting big enough and they wanted kids with them, so we needed more space to take people with us. And I thought, well, the power boats are really getting expensive and gas was $1 a gallon. So, you know, 12 gallons an hour, that was going to be an awful expensive weekend. So I looked at sailboats, but I didn't realize that you didn't have as much room in the same length. So we had to go up to a 30-foot boat. But we did find one we could afford, and it slept 7 people, and it worked beautifully for several years. And then we realized that we could, at some point, take off and go outside of the US. And that became kind of a dream for a while, you know, something. And we actually didn't have a boat for a while. And then the kids were gone, and we said, it's time to sell the house, too big. And I think, I don't know, I think that I was the one that said I wouldn't mind living on a boat for a while because I just love being on the saltwater. And he said, well, let's live on a boat and let's cut the ties and go explore. And so that's kind of the evolution of our, but it's always been around water. I even our kid, I think all of our kids were in, you know, diapers when they were in the boats.
Early years, we started out, my wife and I, with boats and children, just like any other family, and we always wanted to go someplace new. And we kept going farther and farther and farther. So this is just sort of a natural result of that. The other thing is that anytime I was standing on the seashore, I'd look out and for a better term, I call it the wanna goes. I could see the horizon and I wanted to see what was on the other side of it on the ocean. I mean, I enjoyed taking a trip on the land, but I I really I almost feel like I'm compelled to take a trip on the ocean. Felt that way. Linda wanted to go for various reasons, and I wanted to go for various reasons, but they matched up. We almost never had a vacation that wasn't on the water. We had a boat since we were teenagers, literally a boat that was capable. We had boats that weren't so hot before that because we didn't have any money. But yeah, we had maybe one vacation in all of our years raising the family where we didn't spend it in the San Juan Islands where you were just with us. We went to all the different islands and camped and fished and scuba dove and smoked fish and yeah, we pretty much a ocean going family. I mean, we just can't be anywhere but near the ocean. Always wanting to go a little further, see something that we've never seen before. But we did have one situation where we had purchased this boat and we were thinking about going on a trip, but we hadn't really made our minds up because it's a big commitment. We had to give up our careers and go. We were sitting in a hair salon. I was, and the lady next to me was thumbing through a magazine, and she was looking at, it was a travel mag, and I said, you know, we've been thinking about going on a trip like that. And she just instantly started to cry. I mean, she was sobbing. I'm sorry. What did I say? What did I do? She said, no, no, it's not you. My husband just died, and he left me a wealthy woman, and I'd give you every penny of that to have gone and done what you're talking about doing with you and your family. And I said, well, okay, thank you. That put the icing on the cake to do this.
I was at the salon, but Mike was sitting waiting for me, and he got to talking to a woman that was sitting there, and so I would probably not recount that conversation accurately because I didn't hear it. For him, I think it solidified what was already kind of evolving. Um, it's kind of like both of our parents grew up either probably during they were children during the Depression, the Great Depression, or, just after it. So they were very much aware, and life was different back then. And you worked very hard, all your life with one company, and you retired from that company. And then if you had a nest egg, you could do your trip of a lifetime kind of thing. But what both of our parents experienced was that's what they did. That was their mindset. And by the time they were where they could afford to do what they wanted, they had not the health to do it or the strength, you know. So Mike said, I want to do it while we're young enough to really enjoy it and, and really experience it. And of course, both parents thought that was irresponsible. My mom was more adventurous, and she was always encouraging. And so that was the good information going in here. When we first decided that this was what we were going to do, we didn't ask for their permission because we were in our 40s. But Mike's dad said that he thought that was totally irresponsible, and if that's what we wanted to do, then not to expect to be inheriting anything. And he was his dad's only child. So that was, and Mike said, Dad, that's okay.
Like any project or any journey, the hardest part is deciding you're gonna do it. Then finding out what commitments you need to go on it. We had to learn about medicine. We had to learn about sail repair. We had to learn about hydraulics, pneumatics, refrigeration, sailing technology, navigation technology. I could go on and on and on. I mean, the boat is it's the oldest kind of transportation in the world, and yet it's got some of the most modern tools that you've ever seen. The boat can literally steer itself to a destination. A lot of learning. It probably took us 2.5 years. And you know what? I don't know that it ever stops. Just a learning experience forever. Something breaks and you have to figure out what's wrong and trace the problem down and solve it. And when you're doing that in a foreign port, you don't have just a local hardware store to go to. You got to solve it somehow. They're not going to. We've been in places where we were 2,000 miles from land in every direction.
Where you feel you're just dripping all the time. Your body is just perspiring. It's so hot. And they found that they needed these tents that went over the booms to just really shade the whole boat. And in Panama, you can buy the canvas that you need to do that at wholesale prices. I mean, it's just cheap. So I'd do the measurement, tell them how much to go to the market and buy, and then it consumed our whole salon. I mean, for weeks, we'd have to eat in the cockpit or something because it was taken up with other people's projects. But um, I didn't have a worry, I guess, about us being able to to provide. Um, we he would scuba dive or fish. We ate fish more than anything else. But we knew also we would have to adapt to eating local foods. And both of us are kind of omnivorous. We adapt and we eat whatever's available. And I love experimenting with different things. So that, again, didn't worry us. Emotionally, I would say the hardest thing was we had our firstborn grandchild, and she was 3.5 when it was time to leave. And that was hard. Well, I had my own interior design business, and it it wasn't an easy thing to sell that. I had clients that you almost form emotional attachments to. They become friends. We had a whole table at our 50th anniversary of former clients that had, just stayed in contact. I actually think I was ready. I had been, besides my own business, I had a franchise. And I mean, that was my business, my franchise. But I had gotten involved with the franchise company. I was on the board, and I did training for the region. And so I had been so busy with that that I actually was looking forward to not doing it anymore. I loved decorating. I still love it. I was ready for a change.
Probably one of the most painful things was that I had been teaching machine shop here in Snohomish County for many years, and I'm a big believer in skills and trades and the dignity of working with your hands and the joy of making something wonderful. And I love working with kids. And I had the job of the century. I knew that I would never have that job again, but I was teaching at a school called Snow Isle Skills Center, and I had to give it up. And I went into work the day that turned in my resignation. I went in at like 3 in the morning to just sit and get the pain over with so that I could get through the day to tell the boss that this was my last year teaching at that school. And Linda too, she had a great career. She was a well-known interior decorator here in this county, and she had to give that up too. She had a very successful interior decorating business. So we had to put all that behind us, but more so we had to put our family behind us too. We had to sail out the Strait of Juan de Fuca and say goodbye to our family for a number of years. That wasn't easy because we have a wonderful family, but we had this goal and we were going to do it. And I think probably anybody that pursues a goal like this has those same kind of challenges. And the other thing that I'd add is that we had to be willing to take the risk. That it's a risky thing to do that. And the people that we met along the way that were sailors, um, same thing. They all had different motivations, all had different goals, but the one thing that we had all in common was that risk taking.
Other than Queen Charlotte's and the few little minor kind of openings that we had crossed, when we bought the boat to do the trip with that in mind, the boat we have, the one where I'm sitting, we knew that we were going to be at least 10 years because it took us 3 years to get it ready to go and us ready to go. And then we were 4 to 5 years that we planned for the trip, and then probably coming back and having to go back to work and build up enough to buy a house or build a house. So that was kind of our focus. So our first shakedown trip in this boat was to go up the inside of Vancouver Island around the north tip and down the ocean side. And we did that with a group of, were there five boats or so, and we would come into a bay or outlet, an anchor or inlet, I guess, anchor every night. And then we'd go out. And every day we'd leave in the morning. There was usually a bar to cross where, it gets really big waves. Um, and by afternoon, about the time we were ready to come into an inlet, the winds were 25 knots out there. But with that, where I knew I was going to not be in it for 24 hours, you just kind of endure it. And that trip kind of made me realize, okay, I can do this. And then for the 3 years that we were getting it ready, and we would take trips on it too, we'd around. So getting used to the boat, how it worked, and what we needed to do to provision it and supply it and all that kind of stuff. Um, Again, I think the whole process, all of it, it was kind of like a gradual growing into it, not an impulsive, hey, let's do this, and 3 months later you're on the ocean. It took several years.
Yeah, if Linda was sitting here beside me, she'd say the same exact thing because we know exactly when that moment was. We were sitting on a veranda in Cabo San Lucas. We had checked into Mexico and we were listening to some Peruvian whistleblower band. They were wonderful, soft music, tropical breeze, having a pina colada. And we looked at each other and said, we're really actually doing this. We called that our pinch point. You had to pinch yourself and go, wow, we're on our way. Oh, one of the other things that along that line is that we were going to come back and I was going to be in my 50s and concerned that my career would be over. Your old idea that if you're 50 years old, you're not. I came back and got a wonderful teaching job and continued my career. No problem. But I was concerned. Yeah. What have I done to myself? I gave up the best job I ever had. She gave up her business. She fell right back into it. A company hired her to be their interior decorator, so she no longer had to have her own van. She worked for them, and we, it was actually refreshing. We were ready to go again.
There can only be one captain on the boat. And we all know who that is. And he's very capable, and I have that every confidence that he can handle anything that comes along. I push back every now and then because I just want to make sure that he knows I'm here. Like, I don't want to anchor there. I'd like to anchor over there. But he has his reasons, and he usually wins out. Every once in a while, he lets me have my way. But I'm the master down here, down below. Don't mess with my galley. Don't put things where they don't belong. Because when you're offshore, if I'm bouncing around up there, I need to open a drawer where I know what is in which slot. And I need to know where everything is. And so it needs to be put back there. So he leaves that to me and the provisioning. And that's mine. I take care of the cleaning and the repairs, and I did a lot of the painting inside the boat. I did agree when we first bought the boat, because we had been looking for 2 years for the right boat. I went away to a conference in I think DC, and I got a phone call that he put money on a boat. And I said, without me? And he said, yeah. And he said, I think you'll like it. It's going to be a fast boat. And I said, okay, so make sure we can see it when I get home. And I looked at it, and there were no windows, no ports even, no little ports, and just deck prisms. Then I went down below, and there was absolutely no storage for food and pots and pans and linens. And I mean, the bedroom, the cabin for the master cabin was storage for sails. And there was only one head. And I knew that we were going to have people joining us. We needed two heads. I was looking at a boat that I could live aboard that would be my home for at least 10 years. I didn't want to live on a race boat. And so I was pretty unhappy and very ecstatic when the guy canceled the deal. So we kept looking, and we had been to this one marina several times, and one day the owner tossed me a set of keys, and he said, go down that dock about halfway down and describe the boat. And he said, go in. He said, I think this is what you've been looking for. And the canvas was dirty, the plastic windows, were, you couldn't see through them. And it was beautiful. The lines were absolutely graceful, beautiful. A lot of teak. I did not want teak. Mike did not want. The other boat was a purely plastic and metal boat. So I unlocked the companionway and slid the hatch back and sat at the top of the door, the opening there, companionway, and just looked down below. And I thought, this looks homey. I could live in this for 10 years. Of course, being a decorator, the plaid, icky brown plaid upholstery didn't turn me on, but I could see past that. And this was teak. It is teak plywood, and as the galley and some of the rest of it was, and it was too much wood. It would close me in. So I was kind of decorating in my mind as I was seeing it. He wasn't so receptive, but I don't even remember how it kind of evolved. But we could afford it. And I did make the promise that I would do the exterior teak, that I would do the maintenance on that. I did not know at the time that I was allergic to teak dust. And I'm literally allergic. I can't breathe. I just get all choked up. So that's still a bone of contention 30 years later.
I couldn't afford a boat that could do what this boat can do until I made a bunch of things with my skills to make the boat more capable. You and I were pulling the anchor chain on a windlass that I made. You can't set your hand down anywhere on this boat without touching something that I've either built or rebuilt or modified or changed. So I was able to have a much better boat because I'm skilled. So when you have a problem, for example, the alternator isn't working, you either have to figure out a way around it, or you have to be able to acquire in a foreign land something that will replace it. Or if you need a new oil pump. Or the way I set the boat up was that even though I'm an American manufacturer, I bought engines and put them in the boat that I believed would I'd find parts for them worldwide. So yeah, but the mechanical skills, like hydraulics go down, you got to find the right O-rings and you got to rebuild your pump because there's nobody going to give you a new pump. The heat exchangers, the way the boat cools itself is that we take in salt water, run the engine coolant through the salt water in a radiator-like fashion called a heat exchanger, and then expel the salt water. Well, those things clog up, and you have to get in there and clean them out. And you have to understand filters. You have to understand fuel filters. especially fuel filters with diesel motors. I think that you and I and a lot of people I know share the same thing. You like doing things for yourself. You like maintaining your bicycle when you were a kid. You like working on your motorcycle when you're a little older. You you like you like fixing things for yourself. You don't want to take it to somebody else and have them fix it. You want to do it for yourself. So you collect a whole bag of tricks that are mechanical. And becoming a machinist, I actually served a machinist apprenticeship and a tool and die maker's apprenticeship, kind of a 2 year or 4 year degree, 6 year degree kind of a thing. Um, a lot of that skill, measuring and fitting and all of those things and how things work and how they're made, it built and built and built, and I have to be honest with you, it's still building. You know, you learn something's wrong with the refrigeration system right now. It only works on 110 volts. It won't work on 12 volts, and it should. So I don't know. It's just a bit. It's a lifelong learning process. But you have to be somebody that wants to do for yourself. Well, the first thing I'll say is that one of the things that I'm afraid we're denying in the Western world is the joy of working with your hands. That that more than just dignity and we need the products and all of that. I think you see a truck driver get down out of his truck, and what does he do? He walks about 50 feet, turns around and looks at his truck because there's joy and knowing that that's his truck. Same here with my boat. The joy of working with your hands, it's built into the human spirit. And we're kind of denying that in our society. We don't value the skills as much as we should. Although I think that's starting to reverse itself. I think people through this COVID thing realized that who kept the world running while we were down, the the mechanics. Who keeps the airplane flying? The mechanics. Who builds the cars? The mechanics. We came across a boat, a French boat, up in Big Glacier Bay, and they had just had a whole new electrical system put in their boat, and it wasn't working right. Everything was goofy. And I said, well, I'll come over and take a look at it. But they had professionals put all their electrical system in, their batteries and their switches and all of that. I put the electric meter on, and immediately with my meter, I could tell that they were backgrounding, that they weren't grounding with a real ground wire from the whole system. So I went over to the boat, came over here with the supplies I have, made up a really good ground cable, took it back over, hooked it up, and voila, their whole system worked perfect. Feeling that you can solve a problem for yourself is pretty important to me. And I think it's pretty important to almost everybody. One of the things that what we did experience was that a lot of the guys weren't so much on they weren't when I say a lot of the guys, we crossed paths with other sailboats, and a lot of them, some of the guys on them weren't really ready for that world, and they were almost depressed as to how much work they had to do constantly on the boat to keep it going. For the first year, everything works fine, and then stuff starts breaking and wearing out. And I spent a lot of time thinking through when I put this boat together. What can I put together that maybe it's old technology, but it's stuff that I can repair myself, and it's stuff that I can. I don't have computerized charging systems. I have a dial where I can charge my batteries and an amp meter. That I can repair anywhere in the world and probably get parts anywhere in the world. So, again, I don't know how to say it better. It's just the joy of knowing that you're capable. We're in Punta Arenas, that means the sand point in Costa Rica. And I heard that there was a machine shop in town, and my Spanish was good enough then I could go over there. And I took one of the textbooks that I had written on machining, and I took it over to him, and I asked him if I could see his shop, and he said he was beside himself, excited to hear it. And when I got ready to leave, he said if I would stay, he would pay me 1,000 colones an hour to work for him, and the prevailing wage in Punta Arenas was 300 colones per hour. So he would pay me like 5 times the normal wage to come to work for him because I had skills. I was able to go to New Zealand and teach because I had skills. I was able to fix people's boats and support myself because I had skills. So skills can be, they should be, even if you're not working in a skilled trade, skills or capabilities are what people should be. They're built into your needs. There was a book not too that came out about the importance of working with your hands, and the guy, I think he didn't do a very good job of presenting it. He made it all lofty and a big deal, but the thing is, if somebody yanks the carpet out from under society, who's going to save us? You know, it's the people with skills, the farmers, truck drivers, people with skill. I had to come up with ways that the boat could sail itself. I had to come up with ways to handle the sails better because it has basically been a hobby boat, the people before us. We bought it used, of course. And had to come up with ways that she and I by ourselves, without crew, could manage 1,000 square feet of sails because that's what Dreamweaver carries. Um, yeah, I put in a wind vane steering system so that if the electricity was to die, it could steer itself just based on its tuning a sail relative to the wind, and just a whole a lot of equipment that was safe. Like we'd put lines up the deck so that I could clip onto them to go forward. Lines up the shroud so that I could climb up the mast so I could see when we were getting into tricky coral, and a lot of preparation for safety and comfort and ability to sail. We'd come to a village and we'd drop the launch in the water, and then I'd have to hoist the motor down to it, and then I'd have to blow it up and everything. So I came about and invented some davits on the back of the boat that are sturdy enough I can actually stand in the boat in the davits, and I can just drop the boat, start the motor, and go to shore to talk to the chieftain of the village. And I put those on it. Um, yeah, we made some new sails. We repaired the sails. We got things ready to go again. But the thing that mostly that I wanted that I didn't have was the ability to carry the little launch on the back of the boat like a proper yacht. If you look at the instruments on the front here, each one of these is very special in its own way. I mean, in the earliest of days, I had to learn celestial navigation. That is where you sight a star or the sun or the moon and you position yourself that way. And then we got radio navigation, and then we got Loran navigation, and then we got GPS, and GPS didn't start out what it is today. Basically, it told you a latitude and a longitude, and you still had to go down to the chart and plot where you actually were. Yeah, you're staying up with technology all the time. We have the automated collision system on the boat that tells us where other vessels are and tells the other vessels where we are. We have radar that we can print on top of the chart, and I have to learn that stuff over and over again. I've got a Iridium sat phone down there. I've got a ham radio, which I had to take licenses. You could say it's the bounty that we have here in the United States, the wonderful life that we have here in North America. One of the things that I came to learn was that the people that we consider underdeveloped clearly are not underdeveloped. We're overdeveloped. They live a happy, healthy life, and they haven't nearly the stress that we have. Um, and then there was the little things. For example, in fact, I remember a lot of these kinds of things. Um, if you go to the post office in Panama because it was so humid there, they can't put the glue on the stamps. So you buy stamps for your letters, and then there's a glue pot on the counter that you have to glue the stamp to the envelope. Otherwise, the stamps would all be stuck to themselves. I mean, there were just lots and lots of little things like that, that different way of living their lives, you know? But families are still families wherever you go. We went to a group of islands called Vanuatu. And Vanuatu used to be called the New Hebrides Islands, but they were repatriated. Um, so they, we got permission to go to an out island, and you do that by going to the immigration department and making sure that they limit the number of people that can visit out islands. We went, we got permission to go up to an island called Vanua Lava, the place of lava. Vanua Atu means the Vanua, the place of the people, Atu. And we're sailing along. We're going up to going to meet the chief of the island, and we pull in and we get his permission for that island to go further on up to a place called Waterfall Bay. But before we left, we traded with the chief, and he said, "Why don't you just stay here and we'll build you a house on the beach?" Because we were trading with them, we had our trading mats out, and we were one of our favorite spots was we had Linda had a little yellow Magi bullion box, you know, with a lid. And this little fat boy was running around, and he had a little shell with a hole in it. And he wanted that yellow box, and we traded him that little shell with the hole in it was worthless. Traded it for that Magi box. All right, well, we left the chief with his permission. He even gave us his walking stick so that they'd identify us up at the next island and or the next bay. So we're sailing along the volcano that is Vanua Lava, and it's a big hulking black volcano, and there's black sand coming down, and it's a ridge, and it gets closer and closer to the water, and near the water, a waterfall shoots straight out of the lava, beautiful clear water, and down into a pool, beautiful clear pool, and just a few feet away is the ocean. There was only one family living there in a thatched hut. The idyllic scene. I mean, palm trees, clear water, sandy beach. Um, Linda took the laundry in, and she was starting to do the laundry in the water, and putting the clothing on the rocks to dry. And the lady from the hut came out and sat down beside her. No words between them, and started helping her with her laundry. And then I took the chief's sons and went out and or the gentleman's sons, he wasn't the chief, when we went out snorkeling in the bay and we were looking at the fish and things. There were some really big ones out there. Um, yeah, that was one of my favorites. Another favorite was in Australia because I had been in the water from 2 to 3 hours a day for 4 years. I got pretty good at snorkeling. I could go down, 80 or 100 feet and stay down there. I could go down and do things. Linda bought me a scuba diving trip out on the Barrier Reef with a group of people. So here I am, the 50-year-old guy, and with a whole bunch of 22-year-olds on this charter boat. We're going out to the reef, and I'm sitting by myself. Nobody wanted to talk to me. They were all chatting among themselves. And we got out there to this dive spot, and the dive master assigned me to a guy. We put on our tanks, and we put on our stuff, and we went down, and we came back up for lunch. And I asked the dive master. I said, "Look, this is going to sound a little strange, but I'd really rather not go scuba. I want to go on my snorkel." And he, "What? This is a scuba trip." I said, "Well, I'm just more comfortable without a tank. And could you take my partner, the guy you assigned me? Could you partner with him and go on down?" And he said, "Well, sure, fine, go." He was kind of curious as to why I wanted to do that. So I snorkeled around, and we were getting close to time to leave. I figured it was time to leave. I came up, and I came across the guys that were decompressing. I didn't see them up there. I just happened to come across them. And the dive master looked at me because I had been down where his people were having to decompress. And he gave me a breath on his regulator, and went back down. And when I came back to the boat, everybody was saying, "Who are you? What, you're the most, I said, "No, look, I'm nobody special. I just been in the water a lot, and you get used to it. You could do it too." But I just remember the pride of knowing that I was that good on a snorkel that none of those young people on that boat could do what I could do. And I was in my 50s then. And I've got, gee whiz, we could go on and on and on, some of my favorites. That one sticks in my head. We saw yachties that tended to give gifts. And, you know, the bubble gum and candy to the children and such. And of course the children loved it and they followed him around. But it looked a little bit, well, it just didn't look good to us. What we did was we brought things that we thought that they would need. We'd always go to the dollar store whenever we came home and bring back a suitcase full of tools and fabrics. And Linda had just a huge stash of fabrics that she could trade, and cooking containers and knives, and it was back when you could take a knife on the airplane, um, and tools and things that they would need, and we'd trade for things that they had, and it was wonderful. We weren't giving away gifts; we were doing business, because for centuries the schooners came to their island and they traded, you know, and yeah. So we I think they left. We left them. Well, we both left with our dignities and unchanged. Okay, one of the most wonderful experiences you can have is out on the ocean at night with no moon. And you'd have to go someplace in a cavern or someplace. Your eyes can learn to, they can change their chemistry to the point that they can collect a million times more light than you and I are seeing right now. Collect it and process it. So you can sit in the cockpit at night and just starlight read a book. And when the moon comes up, it hurts your eyes. So we just really enjoyed those night watches when we were sailing along, the wind was driving the boat, everything was going well, and we look up and see the sky. There's really more stars in the sky than there is sky. One of the things that we had, we were sailing across the Bay of Panama. The Bay of Panama is quite large, and we had been towing the dinghy, and we saw this group of whale sharks. And one is, if you've never seen them, they're huge, and they have a big mouth. It might be like 8 feet wide, and they go along the surface and they suck up anything they can find on the surface, which I have to assume is jellyfish and plankton and whatnot. Um, and one of them came right down the side of the boat, and we're all oohing and on, and then we realized that he was headed right for our dinghy, and we thought, oh my gosh, he's going to swallow our rowboat, because it would have gone right down his mouth. But just as he came to it, under the boat and back up the other side, somehow I realized that wasn't to be eaten. Another one was that I liked when the boat was steering itself. I like to ride way up on the bow and look back. And I was coming out of Banderas Bay, also in Mexico. And well, that was Panama. Now we're in Mexico. And I look up ahead in the clear water, and I saw the biggest manta I have ever seen. They're huge. It might have been 25 feet across, and it was right across on the surface of the water. And I thought, oh, this is going to hurt. We're going to hit that guy, and I'm going to hurt him. And as we got right up to him, he went right on down, and we didn't touch him. We've had encounters with dolphins, spinner dolphins, if you've never seen them. They jump up in the air and do all kinds of acrobatics. Flying fish. The first time we saw a flying fish, I thought, gosh, there's a bird a long way from land. And they really do. They get up and they flap their little fins and they fly. And they come out of the water and do a 90-degree turn, because the reason they come out of the water is they're being chased by a predator. And if they go that way and the predator goes that way, they serve themselves. We had one that flew right through the bathroom window, right through, it landed in the head. And I go downstairs and he's flapping around in the toilet. We got him out and sent him loose. We would pick up calamari at night on the deck in the morning and clean them and have them for breakfast. Yeah, and oh, one of the things that's most amazing, the most amazing bird of all on the ocean is called a frigate bird. And if you've been to the tropics, they've got long, narrow wings. and they have to land on a cliff or in a tree or something because they can't launch themselves off the ground. Their wings are too big. So we saw when we were sailing up the coast of Australia, we saw a group of frigates sailing 400 miles from land, and they were going upwind. At least they were going upwind compared to our boat down there on the surface. And you wonder, how in the world do they do that? Because they can't land on the water either. They come down with a hooked beak and scoop up fish, but they can't stay on the water. Albatross, oh my gosh, to watch an albatross active soaring and the more the storm gets bad, the more they're having fun. Oh, they're so fantastic. The wave will come by, and the albatross, if he's sitting on the water, doesn't have to flap his wings. He puts his wings out, and the wave goes out from under him, and he's aloft. He's flying. He doesn't have to flap to get off the water. Um, and we saw, snakes and things in the jungles, and howler monkeys in Costa Rica. Yeah, gosh, we could be here all day talking about the things we've seen. First of all, the boat can take it. I never ever doubted that we were not going to make it. The boat is rock solid. In the days that they built this boat, they thought that a half inch of fiberglass was good, so they'd go an inch thick. You couldn't shoot a gun through the side of this boat. It's rock solid. I maybe Linda a little more than me. I never ever doubted. We even had a fitting part when we were up. We were 450 miles from the Marshall Islands, but other than that, many hundreds of miles from land, and the head stay came off the boat. That's always a death sentence for a boat, but it didn't completely come off. I was able to get it fixed. Um, but no, even in that, I don't think I ever feared.
There were kind of short moments that I was scared. Like one time, the coupling on a shifter or something like that went out, and we were just going in where there's waves crashing on a breakwater. And so now we're drifting, and Mike said, will you put up the sail real quick? And he said, keep trying to aim up this way. And so I'm now at the helm, and he's trying to fix whatever it was that was wrong. But he did. He fixed it and got the engine going, and we got in. And like I say, and every time you experience something like that, it gives you confidence that if it's fixable, he'll fix it, and if it's not, he'll figure out a way to get us, safely out of it. And we have all the safety gear. We had the dinghy that we could launch. We had a life pod that we could throw over and jump into, and so we always, had the beacon and the safety harness, and that when the weather gets rough, you don't go up topside. We also had jack lines running down both sides of the deck for when we're offshore, and you don't get out until you reach over, clip on, and it's clipped onto your safety harness, and then you go forward or back. And especially when it was just the two of us, which was most of the time, I couldn't sleep down there unless I knew that he promised that he would not get out of that cockpit without clipping on. And I didn't want to wake up and find him not there. And that happened to a boat. A man lost his wife. He was sleeping below, and she was on watch, and when he woke up, she wasn't there. And he searched and searched, but the chances of finding somebody after several hours is, unbelievable.
Yeah, we met a gentleman down in New Zealand that was a adventure counselor, where they do the bungee jumping and they go kayaking down through waterfalls, and they do all kinds of things that they consider really risky, and they take people on special adventure trips. And we invited him to go with us and see if he would enjoy a ocean passage. And absolutely, he wanted to do that. And we got another crew person as well. And we got into a storm off the coast of Australia. We were about 75 miles out, and the wind was coming straight off the continent, so the waves were building up straight. It's the only time in the whole experience, it wasn't terribly strong wind, maybe 50 miles an hour. It was the only time that the autopilot couldn't steer. We had to hand steer the boat. And but it was up and crash and up and crash, and I'd come off a watch and I'd have salt icicles on my face from this being splashed in the face with the salt water. He said to me when we landed the boat, he said, I never thought that something man-made could endure what we've just come through. Had he done it maybe a couple, 3 times, he would see that you survive. You do survival tactics. Um, and after that, he went ashore, got a telephone, called his girlfriend, and proposed marriage. He thought he had just had a near-death experience and wanted to settle down. Um, it wasn't that big a deal, but it was a big deal to him. Fun for us to watch. Yeah, we were in 70-mile-an-hour winds between Moorea and the Cook Islands. We had microbursts come through. That's a small system, a small weather system. Weather in the world is just systems. And we got up to 70 miles an hour. We had to do what's called heaving to, where you turn the boat into the waves and you trail out a parachute out behind the boat, and it turns and faces the wave, and you just ride it out. The only way you can do that is if you have sea room, if you're not going to get blown up against the shore, in which case I would have had to put up some sails, but we laid on the floor and ate Twinkies, and we got through it. Now, I don't think I was ever, maybe it was my fire department training, I don't know. I don't think I ever felt, yeah, I don't think I ever felt like there was something. We have a saying in our sailboat world of armchair sailors that we talk to people, and lots of people say, gosh, I've always wanted to do something like that, but they never actually will. So the answer is, how do you get from I want to I do it? How do you make that choice? And I guess for everybody it's going to be different, because first of all, you have to figure out how much are you going to have to let go of. What are you gonna put behind you? Linda and I had to put our careers behind us. We had to put our families on hold, which for her was really bad. For me, it was bad. Um, then you have to figure out, how bad do you want it? What are the intermediate steps? What do you have to actually do to make the decision? But at some point, you're going to have to make a hard choice, because that's the hardest part of the whole process, is based on what are you leaving behind? What are you going to do when it's over, if it ever is over? All of those things have to be thought through. Can you stand being by yourself? Can you stand being with your wife and your children in a small vessel? Or is the product that you want to build and sell really needed by the world? But you get all that over with, and at some point you have to commit to the decision. And that's the hardest part of it all. After the decision, once you've really put yourself on the path, you can almost write it down. I've got to do this, I've got to do that. I had to learn how to do stitches, sutures, and I had to learn how to do injectable painkillers. I had to learn, like I said, ham radio. I had to learn all kinds of different skills. Linda too, and provisioning, and how much water do we need when we don't have a fresh water supply, and what do we do to keep ourselves from getting malaria? And so, but that's after the decision. I am going to do this now. Now you could start your A, B, and C list, but until that point, you have to find out, how bad do I want that? And most people, they get to that point and they can't make that choice. They're armchair sailors.
Guatemala, everybody said don't stop there unless you can stay on the boat 24/7, so it wouldn't, make any uh, sense to stop there. So And Nicaragua was still having difficulties or just getting past them. Um, you know, their wars and confrontations down there. It still, people said it's just not good to go there. So we left the last place in Mexico and just kind of went several miles out and bypassed all that. So we were just coming back inland past Nicaragua. And the first bay is the Nicaragua Costa Rica line is in the middle of the bay. So we came into the south end of that bay and anchored. There was another sailboat there already. And he came over the next day and said and introduced himself, as yachties usually do. And he said, "Hey, the guy that owns this kind of campground loves to meet the yachties, so come on to ashore," because we weren't going to go to ashore. That's not where you check in. You're supposed to go on down another day's trip, and that's where the check-in is. We ended up staying there for 2 weeks and met Rudolfo and just ended up spending all that time with them. He'd put us in the back of his pickup, took us up to show us the area around there. Had a big barbecue one day and invited us ashore to, and he kept saying, eat, have platters of meat. And we found out that he had been having trouble with, he likes to replant because the Nicaraguans and the customs there had been to burn the fields and everything, and they were destroying all of the trees that were native there. And so he is a custodian of the land, and he was replanting. Well, his neighbor kept letting his cattle in to eat the young trees. And he finally said, "I'm going to shoot them," Well, we were the benefactors of the cattle from the neighbors that got into his trees one too many times. And we were and kept saying, eat more, eat more. We wanted all the evidence gone. So all of the yachties were in there eating. And then somebody said something, and Mike found out that all of the locals that were there were Border Patrol. And we hadn't checked in legally yet. And we were really worried about that. Well, come to find out, this was Rodolfo's way of introducing his friends to the Border Patrol so that we would be okay. And they said, "Oh, don't worry. We know you're fine. You go on down and check in. You need anything, here's the number, call us. We'll help you." So we started learning, this way of wink, wink, yeah. It just play it loose, play it, So it was kind of a neat experience. But he took us and he just showed us so many wonderful things. We saw cashews growing for the first time, which is just a thing most people wouldn't understand, because it looks like an apple, and the nut actually is part of the stem. And then he told us about the process, which is extremely complex. And we saw pepper trees, and we saw macadamia nut trees, and he showed us the macadamia nuts. I don't know if you've ever tried to open a macadamia nut, but I think Mike's tractor could run over it and it wouldn't crack. I don't know how they do it mechanically, but they are a hard nut to crack. He had a machete, and you couldn't, I couldn't do it. So we just met people, met locals, and we did that all through Mexico too. We didn't hang out with all the yachties all the time. We met locals, and it always made our trip much richer. The ones that that always stayed with the yachties didn't get to know any of the local customs or experiment with the hospitality that we found everywhere we went. The locals want to meet not tourists, because tourists come and expect to be served wherever they go, but we're travelers, and it was a whole different thing. They were interested in seeing our boat. Rudolfo, we took all of the border guys out for a day tour on the boat. And we did that with people we met everywhere. They opened their homes, they loaned us their cars, they gave us fruit, a bag of coffee beans that they grew. You know, wherever we went, it was meet the locals, try to communicate with them. We would have missed the whole purpose of going. Why do you, we thought when we left we were going to see this, that, and the other thing. Oh, we've got to see this, we've got to see that. The things we remember the most, yeah, we remember the places, but it's the people, the people that we met along the way. I can still tell you the name of, I can't tell you the name of the whole family, but we met in Panama, way out of the way. I mean, there was nobody else around. It wasn't in a village. We were headed into David, which is the first town or village in Panama from Costa Rica. And we were enjoying the people that we had met there so much that we wanted to stay longer, but we had run out of our visa. And so they said, take your passports, just go down to David, get them stamped, and then come back up here and open it up to a blank page. He said, people do it all the time. You know, and we had discovered that that's kind of the way things are done there. You know, it's, everything is, yes, this is a rule, but nobody does that. So that's where we were headed, was down there. And the further south we got, the more gorgeous and lush it was. It was even prettier than Costa Rica, which was pretty awesome. So we then anchored outside of this little place where we went ashore and met this family. And they spoke Spanish. And so Mike could communicate. By then, he's getting better at communicating in Spanish. And I think we probably had some food aboard that they wanted, and they traded for.
I bought a chicken from them.
Bought a chicken, a fresh chicken that they butchered there for us. And he had made rings, finger rings, out of a turtle shell. So I don't know how he did it, but so that was what he thought I would be interested in. So he gave me 2 of those rings, and they had nothing. They lived in a thatched hut, and you could see that they had, in a material way, very little. But they were happy, they seemed very healthy, and they had everything they needed to sustain life in a beautiful place. And we thought, we don't need to go back to Costa Rica, let's just keep going. So we did. And we ended up in Panama. From Panama, we went to the Galapagos, and then from the Galapagos to the Marquesas, from the Marquesas to the Tuamotus, from the Tuamotus to the Society Islands, French Polynesia, and then from there to the Cook Islands to Samoa, American Samoa, Pongo Pongo, from Pongo Pongo to New Zealand. Well, then he went down to Tonga. I flew home because my mother was ill. And then I met up with him in New Zealand. He hired crew in Tonga to go to New Zealand. But everywhere we went, the Las Perlas, we met another family. He was Cesar, and we eventually, he came, we had a bag of onions because we had gone to the Agricola, and oh, Panama was wonderful. You could get wine for, you know, $1 for just a liter. And so we stocked up on wine because we weren't going to be able to do that until we probably got to New Zealand. And the fruits and vegetables at the Agricola, I mean, we got bananas and just everything. We loaded up the boat. Well, in the Las Perlas, those people don't get into Panama. So they live off what they grow, and or fish and that kind of thing. So word got around that we had a bag of onions. Everybody wanted our onions, but they would bring something to trade, and that's, you know. So we tried to give away what we thought we could, and this Cesar just, he kind of hung around. Mike could communicate with him, and he was curious about us. So he'd like to come out and just kind of hang out on the boat. And pretty soon we met his wife and his children, and we fed them tacos, I think, or spaghetti, something that was, you know, totally different than what they were used to. I don't think they liked it very well, but they were polite and ate it. I have always enjoyed cooking, and Mike has always enjoyed inviting people you know, without asking me, just inviting people for dinner. One day, 26 people for dinner. And so you learn through the years to be very resourceful and always have a lot of staples that you can make a variety of things out of. So again, I think it was evolutionary. That kind of grew from the time we were married till the time we went offshore, and I think that prepared me for what I was about to run into where we were going. You could go into a store and you had no idea what it said on the carton or the package, and sometimes we were very surprised by what we had purchased, and you just did your best. My biggest fault is that I rarely repeat things. They're kind of the same, but I don't write down my experiments. I did for a while. I started doing that, and we had we had several experiences where one was in Pongo Pongo, and Mike had gone to the market, which you learn to do wherever you go. Everybody has a market, and some things you recognize, some things you don't. So one day he came home with this handmade basket that they give you. They whip up a, you know, woven basket for your produce, and he came home with what looked like a watermelon. It was long and narrow, but it looked like a watermelon. It was green, and so I'm, you know, my mouth is watering. I'm thinking, oh, watermelon, great. So we had dinner and we opened it up and going, oh, that doesn't look anything like a watermelon. It looked more like a bean or something, but there were no separate chambers in there. And we tried frying it. We tried boiling it. We tried baking it. Nothing we did had any flavor. But Mike had said, oh, is this ready to eat? And the man shook his head, you know. And Pongo Pongo, it's American Samoa, so they speak, a lot of them speak English. So we were very puzzled. We never did really figure out. I think most of it went overboard. So, you know, you learn from experiments like that. And some things you'd try and like. I never learned to cook breadfruit where I liked it, but it's a staple in many of the places we visited. And it was served, you know, a lot of times you're not really fond of what they're feeding you, but you smile and go, you know, thank you so much. In the Tuamotus, we ended up staying for 2 weeks where that was not our, maybe even longer than that. But it got to be where Mike has always, when we got to a place, gone in and to meet the chief of the village and to ask permission to stay there because it's their home. A lot of cruisers just think the world is theirs to, drop their anchor anywhere they want. And sometimes they never even go into the village. They'll anchor across the lagoon and never have contact, which I just think is unthinkable. But Mike would always go in and be very polite and meet them and say, we'd like to stay here. Is that okay? And I am very good at repairing, fixing things. So if something needs fixing, I've got lots of tools and things in the boat. I'd love to help. Well, in this village, everything needed fixing. And everyone wanted Maiko to fix it. It became a challenge amongst them. And then they started throwing like luau's for us. And we were the guests of honor. And one day they got a big turtle, and the whole village came out, and everybody got part of it. So we were invited to this feast, and I don't know what part we were eating, but I had to drink a lot of very bad wine to get that food down and smile. You wanted to gag. But they ate everything, that nothing went to waste. But it was one of our most cherished visits where there were tears when we left. Mike would go every day. He would put on his coveralls. There were like a airline, mechanics coveralls, and he'd go in with his toolbox, and he'd say, "What needs fixing? What are we going to do today?" And one of the locals named Henri would be his host, and so Mike would work until about noon. They usually provided fresh, wonderful fresh baked bread for us, or some food, and then somebody would take him either out of the atoll to go fishing for mahi, or inside to dive and fish for whatever. And then at night, they would bring their ukuleles and climb up on the deck, or their guitars, whatever they had, and they would play like "Coming Around the Mountain," and so they knew that. So we heard that a lot, and everywhere we went, they were musical. So that was the common thread. And Mike had his banjo and his guitar. So that was, the routine. And then we'd go in and watch them play piton, which I don't know how to describe it. It's
Bocce.
Yeah, bocce ball. By the time we reached New Zealand, we were just used to talking with strangers and making friends. Well, now we were back in a society more like ours, except the Kiwis are really pretty outgoing. And they'd like to travel. The young ones take off and travel the world. That's not unusual. Either before they go to college and then they come back and settle down, or they go to college and then they take a couple of years and explore, and then they come home and go back to work. Kiwis and the Aussies, both that's not uncommon. So we sat down at a picnic table, just to stop to eat our lunch one day, and this young man was sitting there, and we started talking. Well, we found out he was an adventure counselor. He took people on hikes and parasailing and mountain climbing and, just all kinds of things around there. And he asked us, about us, and we were telling him what we had been doing, and he said, "Oh, that sounds wonderful." And Mike said, "You think you'd ever like to do something like that?" And he said, "Would I? Jump at the chance." And Mike said, "Well, would you like to crew? Pretty soon we're headed over from here to Sydney." And he said, "Yes, yes, I'd love to do that." So we gave him Mike had a cell phone because he'd been working there, and we stayed in contact. And then we ran into somebody else. I forget how we met Jose, but he had been a cook on a cruise ship, and he ended up signing up with us too. So we had two young men that had never been on a sailboat like ours going out in the ocean. And we took them. First couple of days was really nice. We had the spinnaker up. The adventure sailor was, or the adventure guide was a guitar player. And so we were sitting in the cockpit, and just a beautiful day. And he was playing his guitar, we were singing, the spinnaker was up, life was good. And I thought, oh, I'm supposed to be showing these guys, what it's like. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go down and check the barometer and plot our position and mark it down in the log like you're supposed to. And I went over and tapped the barometer, and it went like that. And I went, I've never seen it do that. And I went up and said to Mike, do barometers break or if it stop functioning? And he said, "Oh, you didn't do it right." And I said, "After all this many miles, I think I know how to tap a barometer." And he came down and he said words I won't repeat. And he started yelling orders: "Pull the sails down, take everything off the deck, anything that's not tied down, take it off the deck, get it secured, put the hatches, lock the hatches, everything buttoned down." And we looked off to the south, and the sky was boiling black clouds. I mean, it was something I have never seen before and hope never to see again. And the next several days were just unbelievable. It was like being in a washing machine on spin and agitate all at the same time in this boat. So when we got into Sydney, the adventure sailor got off, kissed the dock, called his uncle who lived there, and as soon as we were checked in, his uncle took him to his place, and we never saw him again. But we did hear that the first call that he made was to his girlfriend, and he proposed. He said, "When I get home, we're getting married." So it was definitely a life-altering experience for him. By that time, I would say we were very committed to where we were and what we were doing. And we had been through enough rough water that I have all kinds of confidence in my captain. If it can be done, he'll do it. He'll figure out a way. I know he thinks I've doubted him at times, but I think that's what gave me there were a couple of times I was scared, but not, that was uncomfortable. That was just downright uncomfortable. I mean, I was sitting on the floor to eat. You wedge yourself in between one space and another because cooking was next to impossible. My mom died unexpectedly when we were in New Zealand. I flew home for the funeral. And then when I came back, we went to Australia. But, and my daughter had had a whole pregnancy after I left, and a child born while we were in Panama. I was there for the birth. I did tell him when we left, I will be home for weddings, births, and unfortunately funerals. Beg, borrow, or steal, that's the deal. I have to be able to go home for those things. So I did that, but I missed the pregnancies, and that's kind of a special thing between a mom and a daughter. But when Mom died and the kids were born, I did not want to miss my grandchildren, their young years, because that's when you forge those bonds that last. And so he would have, because I had an inheritance, we could have afforded to spend that and go on around, into the Mediterranean or whatever we wanted to do. But I did not want to. At that point, I said, I need to go home. I need those family connections are very strong for me. He was an only child and didn't have that. So, but he didn't put up a fight. But I know that he would like to have continued. That family is really important to him too, our family. So that was where, the change of, okay, I'm ready to go home. But I enjoyed every minute of it. And the memories of our trip are part of who we are now. Everything is like referenced or compared to what we've done. Our compensation has been 8 trips to Alaska, which we've shared with family and friends, because that's our greatest joy, is sharing our love of traveling in the sailboat and seeing things and experience. And like Alaska, there's so many different things to see and experience there. But when we left on our trip to the South Pacific, we thought we were going to see places, that was the thing that was going to be important. We learned that it was the people and the culture and the foods and customs that became more central and more important. And that's what we miss, I think, most of all, is when you travel in the U.S., we did meet and make friends with a lot of boaters up in Alaska and locals, but those others that we made in the South, I think, stand out more. People frequently ask us, what was your favorite place? I'd easily go back to New Zealand, Australia, but I would love to go back to French Polynesia. Mike got a staph infection, and we had to miss some of the Marquesan Islands, and Fatu Hiva I wanted to see. Look it up and look at pictures at it. It's like something out of a Disney imagination for a film. It's just beyond description. We saw some of the islands, but the one, Fatu Hiva, is just, it's like a fantasy, just the landscape. And we anchored there long enough to offload somebody else's crew member that we had with us, that we were transporting with us. And Mike was literally flat out. He dragged himself up to set the anchor in the crashing waves around us. And then we hauled the anchor and went back so he could get medical help. Staph infection is very common in the South Pacific. You just have a little scratch and you're in the salt water. You have to watch it. You have to medicate it right away. And it catches you. He was fine. He went down below to plot our course. And he came up and he was just literally green and he looked like he was going to collapse. And he said, "What's the matter?" He said, "I'm sick." And he had a fever. And I mean, it just came on him really quick. And so I pretty much took the boat back to where we were. And then, of course, he helped set the anchor. He drug himself up because it's not for me, it's a one person thing. He could do it by himself. But I'm not up to that. I don't trust myself.
French Polynesia, the people, the people. Yeah, French Polynesia is beautiful. The coral is beautiful. Nothing to compare. But we just fell in love with the Polynesians, the real Polynesians that live in the out islands, not Tahiti. Tahiti was kind of fun, but you know it's a city. You know, you read about Aggie Gray's bar on the waterfront. That those days are gone.
I think one place I would like to see that we didn't go was Fiji. I would like to go to Fiji.
Yeah, I think Fiji. We didn't. We went around Fiji. We kind of circled it, but we didn't go to Fiji. But we made pretty much all of the island groups in the South Pacific. There's one group of French Polynesian islands. There's four groups: the Gambiers, the Tuamotus, the Society Islands, and the Marquesas. And we made these three, but we didn't get down to the Gambiers. So that was something we missed, and Fiji. But I made New Zealand, Australia, Tonga. We went to oh gosh, the Solomon Islands, the Marshall Islands.
I think advice that we give to people who are thinking about doing what we've done is to, for current situations in various countries, maybe join Seven Seas organization, which gets information from people all around the world, current information, and it's published, and so you can they share, like now you have to apply so many more months ahead of time to get a permit to go here or there. And for us, like when we wanted to go to the Galapagos, we heard so many different things. And, you just have to find current information. And so there are organizations out there that specifically tune into or organize people like us, individuals, not companies, that are cruising the world. And they keep you informed. We could tell you what existed when we were there. But the one thing I will tell you that doesn't change is that Americans seem to feel entitled wherever they go. And if you're a cruiser, you have to respect the customs of the country that you're in. Try to learn at least greeting in their language before you go. Or, study a language if you're going to spend time there. Mike even started learning Samoan. He can greet, just recently he greeted a woman in a restaurant. We could tell she was Samoan, and he said something to her, and she turned around and came back in, and so they ended up conversing, and she went out and told her father, who was in the car, that she had met somebody that had been there. And that impresses people. I mean, just like if people come to the U.S. and they learn to at least the basics of hello, goodbye, what they need, where they, the information they need. And the other thing is the respecting their customs. Like in Mexico, if you go into an official government office, they want you not to be in rags or, short shorts, and the women not in, revealing clothing. Just respectful, like you would go into a business office, and treat them with respect. And you'll go a long ways. They're very accommodating and very friendly and hospitable.
Well, number one, the hard part is making the choice that you're going to do it. But the making that choice takes a whole lot of preparation behind that, that you know for very clearly. I'm thinking of a student that he came to me one time and said, I need a few days off from class because I'm going to go ride in a motorcycle race. And I said, are you the best motorcycle racer that's ever been? And he said, with a little thought, yes, I am. He said, well, then have a good time. I'll have some homework for you. You know, make sure that you know you're right. And then the hard part is choosing to take the leap. It's kind of like you're swinging on a trapeze and you have to grab that next trapeze. Make sure that you are ready to take the risk, but be prepared to fail because nobody ever had a linear success, or at least it'd be the rare one. There's ups and downs for everything, including us with our boat trips and including us with our careers. Probably more for Linda with her interior decorating than with me and machining. I've always been a goal-oriented person. I mean, if I don't have a goal, I'm kind of lost. Not all people are that way. We did see a lot of people that took a sailboat and went sailing, and it didn't work out for them. You can buy real cheap sailboats in Hawaii because they get to Hawaii and go, I wasn't ready for this. I did not know how bad it could be. It's challenging. That's what I'm saying. There's going to be failure. There's going to be stress. It's not going to be all smooth sailing, and I don't mean just sailboating. Getting in your camper and heading for Panama, or I don't know, learning to fly a plane and building your own airplane, or you have to be deep down. You have to be ready to make the decision. And see, all those people that you were talking about, the armchair sailors, they never will get around to making the decision. It just sounds like they would like to. Um, to tell you the truth, I think Linda talked about this, but when we decided we were going to do it, we were really into it at that point. I told my father this, and my father, of course, like all of our fathers at my age, grew up during the Great Depression, and they were all about money and holding on. And my dad got actually angry, and I was a little disappointed in that. He never did, but he said he was thinking about disinheriting me and blah blah blah. Um, and then when we got down to San Diego, he was living over in Yuma with his wife, and we rented a car and went over there to see him. And he walked me around the trailer park, and he was introducing me to all of his friends. This is my son who's sailing around the world. And it dawned on me that my dad wasn't mad at me. He was mad at himself because he never lived out his dream. He always wanted a boat and go fishing. So he just didn't, he never made the choice. He was an armchair sailor. And I made the choice. But it was easy for me again because of all the skills that I have from all the life of learning.
Do I wish I had stayed sailing longer? Um, that has to be a yes and a no. Um, I loved the life, but his father died while we were gone. In fact, the day one of our grandchildren was born. And we happened to be back in the States for the birth. And my mother died while I was gone. And so all of a sudden, we're the elders in the family. And we have a close family. And so that was the pull to stop. We had hoped that our kids would come. We thought we'd given them wings, but they couldn't see themselves, coming in to join us anywhere because we were so far away. And that was regrettable. And of course, they regret it now. But I'm not I don't spend any time regretting that we're not out there. Like I said, I think we going to Alaska, our family could join us, and so that's how we could share it with them.
When we ended the trip, the pressure from being away from the family had affected both of us, and Linda was like 85, 90%, I got to go home. I was like 60%, I want to stay, 40%, I want to go home. But she was my mate, so we came home. The last trip we took was 40 days at sea. We left the Marshall Islands, sailed up by Kamchatka, Russia, past Midway, across the Gulf of Alaska, and made landfall on Vancouver Island. On our way home, and the family came out to greet us out there.
I would like to have spent more time, like I say, in the Marquesas. Yeah, Marquesas, Tuamotus, um, the outer islands of the Society Islands. Loved Bora Bora. Oh my goodness. We got to be there for their fete, and that's their inter-island competition, not for tourism. They tolerated us, and there's no people more hospitable normally. But this is their celebration, inter-island. This is their tradition, and not the celebration of the French. And the the dancing is beyond description. And it's like a whole football field. Each village prepares their particular dance. Their dance is, their story is expressed in dance, and it's understood throughout the region. They use flora and local, flowers, leaves, shells, coconuts to make their garments. And after a Tahitian does her Tahitian hip movements, there's leaves all over the field. But when the men come out, these tattooed, bronzed bodies, and they've got their head dress with the leaves and flowers, the drums that beat, your body, you feel the vibrations, and the whole football field of these villages, and they're and with the drums and everything, it's just magic. That's a good word for it. Magic. It is emotional. It is startling. It's impressive. It's
There aren't real words to describe it.
no, it's hard to describe. You have to experience something like that. And there was a 9-year-old girl that was the best Tahitian dancer. She could move her body in ways I didn't know a body could move. And she was their star. It was just beautiful, absolutely beautiful. We had our 30th wedding anniversary there, and all these villages come from all over the Society Islands, and they build like little impromptu huts, and they have restaurants in them, and they use all local flowers and leaves and coconuts, and it was like being inside of a gigantic floral bouquet. And I had a pariu on, and the headdress. I think I have, oh, in our cabin we have a picture of that, our dinner table. And we had a couple from Japan that were cruisers and friends of ours, a couple from Germany, the Orion, the Takamami, and we had friends from home that were joining us right at that time. So we had this international table, and couldn't have been a nicer celebration. And then of course, we had been watching their competition, their inter-island competition all day. Since I was a child, it was a dream of mine to be in Tahiti and seeing real Tahitian dancers. And so I got to see a lifelong dream. One of the reasons that a lot of women left prematurely and went home, there were a lot of dissolutions along the way. It's not an easy thing to be captive in small quarters. And I think our boat size helped because we had personal space within this boat. If you have a small boat, it's hard to have your own space. And I think that's important because you're there 24/7. But when you're together, our boat was one of the larger ones. The average boat was in the mid 30-foot range. And there were smaller boats. We saw 27-footers that made it all the way to New Zealand, which I would never have tried to do. But then there were the bigger boats. But we kind of still fit in with the general cruising. And so a lot of activities happened on our boat because there was room for a lot of people. We had movie nights, and we'd put the TV up there in the VCR, and everybody kind of line up around there. And so that was nice. But most of the time, if we were down here, the general conversation was the men talked about anchoring challenges, electronics, navigation, how to fix the refrigeration. It was all the hardcore stuff of what keeps your boat afloat. We had no women time. The women, when it was on our boat, I was serving people and making things and that. When we got to Pongo Pongo, the weather was so unseasonably bad that the fleet was gathering. It was just filling up the harbor there. And we had a friend of mine and that I had made through traveling. You'd run into the same kind of people, the same people periodically. And I said, we need a girls' day. So we made a reservation and spread the word throughout the fleet. We had, I don't know how long that table was. We must have had 20 some odd women that went for lunch. And lunch lasted probably 2.5, 3, maybe 4 hours, I don't remember. But we had a girls' day, just time to talk about recipes and kids and grandkids and the things that women usually talk about. The cruising world is mostly about just the day-to-day, how to keep your boat afloat. And only 2 times in all the 4 years we were out had I had a day with other women, just exclusively. And I went home when my mom was ill, and I was invited to some friends' house, and they had a group of people who were getting ready to go, and they asked me a question like, what have you noticed that you would warn us of? And I looked at the men that were in the room and I said, if you want your wives to enjoy their trip and to stay with you on this trip, and I mentioned this thing and I said, it is a need. We need companionship of, talking about stuff other than boat. And you know what, I was met with opposition. One man said, well, my wife will go anywhere I go and be happy about it. And I'm thinking, yeah, in your mind. But it's not talked about. I saw that class that we took before we went that warned you about all the things that you needed to be aware of. I privately talked to the woman, and he has a new woman now that's going on those trips. The boat's still going, but she kind of let me know that it was the lack of, you didn't have that, what I'm interested in, or, yes, I'm interested in meeting people. I loved all of that. But there was that need. And I was without my family and my children and grandchildren. So I needed other women just to fulfill that. I didn't need it every day. I didn't need it every week, but I needed it occasionally. And so that was that would be the thing I would know now if we ever did it again, that I would change. I would make sure that I had that every once in a while.
We knew we were going to go to exotic places and see exotic things. We didn't realize how important the person to person connections were going to be, the friends that we made along the way. And it's important to me to know that not only do I remember them, but they remember me. That we made a difference. She said it best. She said we weren't tourists or we weren't visitors, we were travelers. We came, we took part, we worked in the villages, we were part of the lifestyle. I still stay in touch with some of my friends down there in New Zealand.
The French are very all nudists at heart, I think, at least in French Polynesia. And we had a French crew woman that, was quite comfortable, you know, um, being that way. Not that she was on our boat, but we would run into it, and it would always shock me. I I came up topside. We were in the Cook Islands, and the weather again it was really bad that year, and so boats would gather in there. When a French boat came in, and this it came over, and I went up just as they had rounded up, and he was dropping the anchor, and here's this totally nude man bent over dropping the anchor, and it was just like, and I just turned around and walked back down below deck. It was like hours before I felt like I could show my face. Met them ashore, but they were clothed then, thankfully. It's just like, why would you come into an anchorage like that?
I don't think it was for us. I don't think we had a culture shock. I think what the shock was that I saw was that when people would come to a small group of islands, you have to check in, and they didn't show the respect that I think they should have. They'd come in tennis shoes and raggedy clothes, and maybe that's all they had. But I would always put on a white shirt and slacks and go in, and I'm a visiting person and you are the official here. I respect you. I think that kind of shocked me. Culture shock. Yeah, I guess the other one was that those people down there, especially at the out islands, we saw people that had never seen a white man in 10 years or never seen a white man. Um, those people were those people were not underdeveloped. They didn't have a lot of stuff. They just had everything they needed. And we are overdeveloped. We're so focused on stuff here in North America.
Best piece of marriage advice. Um, well, I think I really just said it with making sure that the woman is, like that man's attitude that said that my wife will go anywhere I am, and she's content. I bet if his wife had permission to be honest, she would say, no, I can understand what she's saying. Women need women time sometimes. And the guys it was all guy time. And so I would say for the men to be conscious of the fact that women do have that need. Most women, maybe not everyone.
I can't answer that because I'd have to get to know them and understand them and have a couple of beers with them and find out all those things that we talked about that lead up to the decision to go. Linda and I have done that more than once. And we always come away with kind of a gut feeling. Yes, they're going to go, and yes, they're going to do it. No, they are not going to do it, or if they do, they will fail. I saw boats where, and you know, every boat has a captain. But I saw boats where they had a woman aboard, but they were not the first mate. They were the, I don't know. They have to have a say in what you do and where you go and how you fit out and what foods you buy and make that sure that they're a part of, not just a passenger, a cook. Um, I'm probably not as good at that as I could be, but I tried. When we were in Panama, we made friends with some from young folks from the military down there. The military was a big deal in those days. It was after the Noriega invasion, and just they were kind of settling down. And we took one of a guy that was a helicopter instructor with us down to the Galapagos Islands, and he was an avid fisherman. So as we're coming into the Galapagos, we hooked up a 150-pound sailfish, and we didn't want to have 150 pounds of sailfish meat in the freezer, and I didn't want to kill that beautiful animal, but we got him reeled up against the boat. I got my hands on his bill and took the hook out and let him go. And then shortly thereafter, we had probably the most unique experience of the whole trip. And this again is in the Galapagos Island, because they're in the ocean and around it's animal soup. There's animals everywhere you look. There's some sort of big cetacean. He was maybe as small as a small killer whale, but it was kind of a dolphin. I don't know what it was, but he came up and he put his chest up against the side of the boat, and he was just swimming along. And we went up there and we were looking down at him, and he was looking up at us. And I'm telling you, man, I was not looking at a dumb animal. He was checking us out. You could see the intelligence in his eyes. We were looking at each other. I don't know how long we did that, but he swam right beside the boat while we looked at him and he looked at us, and it was like I I'd like to think he was welcoming us to the Galapagos Islands, but it was so soul stirring to look into his eyes, or her eyes. I don't know if it was a boy or a girl, but yeah, it was amazing. The Galapagos themselves were kind of amazing. Standing in line at the bank, and a marine iguana runs across your feet. Well, the first thing I'd say was that we didn't start out with the dream. We just started out enjoying life and taking our children up to the San Juan Islands in a smaller boat, and it kind of grew and grew and grew within us. You know, I do say this to the kids, and they all snicker when I say it, but when a baby is born, their eye focus is very short. They can see the nipple on their mom's breast, and that's about as far as they can see. And then you hold them up, and they can see a little further out. They can see their dad standing behind, or they can see, and then pretty soon their focus goes further out and further out, and that's a process that lasts your whole life. As you get older, you can see further out, and travel and self-education, hobbies, growing what you're capable of doing. It's all part of that focus going out from that first short focus. Um, I feel sorry people that don't undergo that process, and there are. There are people they get their feet firmly planted and they leave them there. As long as they're happy, I guess I shouldn't say anything about them, but I like to know that I have options in life, and my skills give me options. Sailors have one saying. They have two sayings. One, we never part company with another sailboat by saying goodbye. We always say, see you later, because life works that way. It's a fabric. And the other one is, do it. Do it now.